Raila Odinga's African Union chairperson bid is something that is of interest to the country. But despite of an attempt to get one candidate, the Eastern Africa has failed to settle on one. And Raila Odinga of Kenya is going to face off with Richard Randria Mantrol from Madagascar, Anil Gayan from Mauritius, and Mahmoud Ali Youssouf Mofa, the former Foreign Affairs Minister from Djibouti. The African region needs to produce, the East African region needs to produce one candidate, but that has flopped. But Odinga's campaign seems to have goofed, or rather is goofing. And even looking at the recent China-Africa Cooperation Forum that is going on in Beijing, any attempt by the country Kenya to project Raila as a man to advance the interest of the country is not working well for his candidature. And experts are warning that while Raila have a fair chance of winning, he also have equal probability of losing. Which way? Welcome to the board. I want us to look at the nitty-gritties, the detail, the goofs, and what really is the standing of that candidature. Kenya is facing Djibouti, just like in 2020, when Kenya faced Djibouti, a non-permanent member, for election to be a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. And after the first round of voting, no country could get the two-third vote that was needed, 128. And so they went for a rerun, and Kenya was able to beat Djibouti by getting 129 against 62 for Djibouti. And Kenya managed to replace South Africa as the non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. But of course, experts are warning that the results, or rather the match, the context in 2020 should not be used by a benchmark by Raila Odinga's campaign team, rather by country Kenya, to underestimate the candidature of one of the strongest opponents to Raila Odinga, Mahmoud Yusuf Ali Mofa from Djibouti. And the experts are saying the Djibouti candidate is the strongest opponent to Raila Odinga. And so on 28th, and there have been quite a number of instances. And I want us to look at, interrogate these instances, or rather, let me look at the faces of these campaigns, how Kenya, or rather Raila Odinga's campaign team, have been goofing on a number of fronts. On 28th August, the country Kenya was launching Raila Odinga's bid officially in Nairobi. And despite of inviting 8 countries to grace that occasion, Kenya was not able to even to pull 5. Yoweri Kaguta Museveni was present on Uganda. Samia Suluhu from Tanzania was present. And the current chairperson of the East African Union, of the East African Community, Salva Kiir, was in Nairobi. The Somalia president sent an apology and explained to William Ruto why he could not attend. The others sent their representatives, and some did not even communicate. But this statement by Museveni was a big blunder that really angered some people.
There was a young man from Djibouti, he came. The young man I normally see him that he's a minister. He came and told me that he was the one who was the candidate for Djibouti. Of course, I greeted him well. We took photographs.
So here, I know to the Kenyan diplomats, Museveni was sounding like supporting Raila, but belittling the other person did not sit well with Djibouti, and they really voiced their concern, and I saw the diplomatic team raising. In fact, I was expecting that country would try to do, a rejoinder after what Museveni said, but they kept mum. However, the minister, Elias Dawale, the Minister for Economy, Finance in charge of industry in Djibouti, wrote a long-worded statement, or rather response to what Nani had said, or rather responding to what Museveni had said. And I just want to read for you that text. It is a bit long, but let's just read it because it will give us really the feel of what I want us to get. A brotherly reaction on our great President Museveni's dismissive message. Your Excellency, as a respected leader, I was not expecting you taking a dismissive tone toward your young brother, Djibouti's Mofa, Minister for Foreign Affairs. Dear Excellency President, I am not offended by an elder calling his younger and young man privately. But as per our African values, visitors, guests have very special respect. Therefore, the minimum expected from an African elder and leader was calling publicly your visitor or guest by his name, Mr. Mahmoud Youssouf Ali, or simply the minister or candidate from Djibouti. Now, that text continues to say, more importantly, you know him well, since 2 decades as Djibouti's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Dear Excellency, while being fully aware of your decision to endorse Honorable Raila Odinga of Kenya, Minister Mahmoud considered very important to pay you courtesy visit, as well as all heads of state and government of region. Indeed, as a son of Horn of Africa and East Africa, he therefore decided to communicate with you in person his candidacy as well as his vision for Africa. The same visit was made to Kenya leadership too. And so, they responded to what Museveni had said. Of course, it continues to speak on many other things. So, they've spoken about, they've taken a long text, and if you read, you can go and check his Twitter. It's called alias Dawale. You can search and look for that tweet. It's a very long tweet in response to how, according to them, Museveni demeaned their candidature. It didn't sit well with them. Now, the second one was the meeting by Islamic states. Not really a goof, but I just want to lay a comparison. Since Raila Odinga announced his candidature, or rather intent to vie for that position, I have not seen a joint statement from the East African community or any bloc, regional bloc in the continent saying we are behind Raila Odinga. And if you ask me, we are not, the country is not campaigning for Raila. There is this meeting that was read here. The 50th session of the Council of Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation held in the capital of Republic of Cameroon, Yaoundé, from 29th to 30th of August 2024, unanimously adopted a resolution to support the candidacy of Mr. Youssouf, Minister, of course, Mahmoud, Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the Republic of Djibouti, to occupy the post of Chairperson of African Union Commission for the period of 2025-2029. Sorry. So you can look, if you look around, you see there is a regional bloc. There seem to be, the mode of campaigning seems to be going not necessarily just individual countries. I'm waiting for a time when to start with, the East African community will even issue one statement, a joint statement on this, or even a regional bloc. And that is why there is a diplomat who was saying that the Kenyan candidate is a very good candidate, but he seemed to be on the losing end because of not a good backing even in the continent. Let's listen to this.
Ahmed, first to you. You worked with Odinga during the Grand Coalition government, and you know the man. Before we get into the nitty-gritty details of what awaits the man and the country ahead of the continent-wide campaigns, what can you tell us about the persona?
Good morning. I think what is important is to look at the context today of the African continent and the states and the nations that are there, and how we expect they're going to behave towards Kenya's candidate, Mr. Odinga. I think Mr. Odinga is going to lose this election in Addis Ababa, and I think I'm the only one who thinks that. I think that across the board, everybody believes that he's going to win. I will be shocked if he gets even a slim majority. I think the candidate from Djibouti is going to win a landslide. And I'll tell you why. First, let me give you a little bit of a context on the African continent. I think there are three things that are happening in the continent. There's a rebellion of the youth, as you know, as we have it here in Kenya, across from Senegal all the way to the Sahel, all the way to Sudan. There is a popular national democratic revolution. I can't find any other word for it except revolution or transformation. And one of the major issues that young people are fighting over is because there's bad governance and terrible economy. And the way Africa is structured in the international political economy, it's set up to fail.
Now, there is another thing that I want us to look at, and this was raised by a very respected man, elder, or rather a diplomatic expert to this country, Ambassador Martin Kimani. He was actually the representative, the person representing Kenya at that United Nations, the person who won that seat, United Nations permanent representative to the United Nations Security Council in 2020. An attempt by country Kenya to show that Raila is advancing the interest of the country, because that is not really, and he was asked about what does Kenya tend to win, what is Kenya going to benefit with if Raila Odinga gets that slot. He responded this way.
So what would this chairmanship mean for Kenya? We went after it in 2017. Musa Faki, to use a Kenyan colloquial term, alipita katikati yao, Amina and the Senegalese a candidate. But why would this be critical for Kenya?
Well, the chairperson of the commission does not represent Kenya. And in fact, any real show of promoting Kenyan interests would not be taken well, and the chairperson would come under considerable pressure. So I'm not sure that Kenya is going to, in itself, win anything out of the chairing, other than the prestige of having one of its citizens heading the African Union Commission. Now, of course, Kenya is seeking this position not due to technocratic reasons, but due to political ones. Kenya wants to promote Raila Odinga because of his political profile, because of our internal political dynamics. And so him going to the African Union, I think, will be a considerable victory for him on a personal level. It'll be an indication of the Ruto administration's ability to win a continental race.
Now, that tells you that it's not really it. Now, I listened to that, and why it came to my attention is the current summit going on in China. There is China-Africa Cooperation Summit that is going on. Now, William Ruto flew with the president, with the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Yeah, you can see, of course, he flew with the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga and Musalia Mudavadi, and is part of delegation, including the finance minister, the treasury, CS, John Badi. Now, when China met, one thing that has been going on is Ruto then have also been meeting a couple of presidents under the pretense of campaigning for Raila Odinga. And I know people are asking, is the Djibouti candidate in China? Yes. The Djibouti candidate was in China, but their president is not there with their president. He's actually there with the minister and his campaign team. The Djibouti president, the Djibouti candidate is in China, yes, but with the minister, that minister that I've just read his tweet, with his campaign team. But on this, on our end, William Ruto seems to be leading. Of course, it's trying to act like leading the campaigns for Raila Odinga. I've looked at the presidents I've met, not going any far. Let's just look at William Ruto's Facebook, Twitter page. We have it here. I've been looking at it here. So just look at a couple of presidents that the president met with Raila. This one, he met Zambian president. Then we have the Chad, the Zambian president. That is, I think that was the presidential, that's where he was residing. You can see him there with Raila. Then apart from him, he also met the counterpart from Chad, Beijing, held talks with Jamal. This one was recently elected. And we also discussed the support for candidature of Honorable Raila Odinga's bid for position of African Union Commission chairperson. Then there is also another meeting with held talks with the President of Togo and Gatasimi of Mali on Pan-African Congress to be held in Lomé, Togo, later in the year. Mali also discussed support for the candidature of Honorable Raila Odinga. Mali is one of the countries that I think has experienced the coup d'etat within the Sahel region. Yes, so then after that, there is one with Guinea-Bissau, and there is another one with Rwanda. If you ask me, apart from this Togo and Guinea-Bissau, Togo and Mali, the others have been friends of the country. And then, I want to ask you a question. Was William Ruto with Raila Odinga in China to campaign for Raila? Or William Ruto was just in China for his objectives? Do you think the reason why Ruto went to China was to campaign for Raila? To campaign for Raila was just in the sideline. But it's a blunder, and Ambassador Martin Kimani is saying it's a blunder for Kenya to portray like they're pushing some self-interest with Raila. In fact, that sometimes doesn't sit well with the African as a continent, with Africa as a continent. And that is why he's saying Raila needs to sail as a person. He needs to sell his agenda. In fact, if you look at the communication from Raila, to me, it does not show really the fact that what it really stands for, from Ruto's side, what it really stands for. So it is a blunder for Ruto to lead Raila's campaigns. Of course, he's been going to public and saying, going all over and saying all manner of things that he's a person to lead in the market of the country. But of course, on some angle, it does not work in favor of Raila. In fact, Raila does not have his campaign team in China. If you ask me, Ruto flew with Raila to China so that he can dilute the dig on the appetite for loans that is taken there. Because the country is saying, we are talking about debts here, you are in China, you are supposed to come back with debts. So the country might be, the photos of Ruto with Raila, with other presidents, is what you will see in the headlines. They will be sponsored and they will be in the headlines. But if you read the real details why Ruto is in China might not get the attention of the media. Because the media will be occupied with talking about how Raila and Ruto are meeting in China. Those stories of Raila Ruto meeting are no longer making news. And so that was the agenda. But in real sense, if you ask me, the Raila Odinga does not, the campaign team for Raila is not doing much. I may be wrong on this. They're not doing much. I'm not seeing them. Even if you look at the way, if you look at the social media page for the Djibouti candidate, we understand that the strongest opponent, I think, is miles away. And there is an understanding. There is something that is sitting pretty comfortable. Some people are sitting pretty comfortable with it here.
There is a malaise on the African continent about transformation and change. And I predicted this on another station, and that change has come here in the form of General Z. And I think it's going to go all the way down to South Africa. Now, the people who are in charge of these nation states around the world have fundamental influence from the metropole. By the metropole, I mean there is this really neo-colonial words that are used for certain sections of Africa. For example, in West Africa, it's Francophonie. It's influenced by the French.
Okay.
Then there is some parts that are called Lusophone. And then there is the English-speaking ones.
Okay.
And so the AU is divided based on these fundamental tectonic plates. And one of the biggest influences of the AU is the French. Now, Amina, and I was a spokesman at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Chief of Staff there, we knew we were going to win. And then the French government intervened heavily in those elections. And we lost. We even had the support of Djibouti. This Djibouti that is standing here today.
Yeah.
One of the people who stabbed us in the back in that election. I think that the same scenario is what is going to happen in the AU. I think the French, the Sahel areas, major states in Central Africa are going to stand up to the candidature of Mr. Odinga and say no. Secondly, before I pass it on, is that I think this is the wrong move for Mr. Odinga. The question is whether or not in a continent where the 80% of the people are under 25, whether or not it serves the interest of the continent for us to have a man who's retiring in his 80s, whether he's going to have the energy, the vitality, and the gusto to understand and do the necessary issues that are supposed to be done about youth, the youth bubble in our continent. Lastly, you know that the African Union has no teeth. It is a place where, for an example, I'll give you a simple example. There's been coups in the Sahel. And one of the most important provisions of the African Union is that if you do a coup, you're done. But most Africans support the coups in the Sahel, including their populations, because there has been massive exploitation of resources of the French Republic in the Sahel. For example, the French have the largest gold deposits in Europe, and they don't have gold in France, Ayub.
That Raila is ahead of others. Maybe listen to this gentleman here. He's saying there is that feeling, that there is a feel good that Raila is ahead of others, but in real sense, that might not be the truth. Now, there are three factors why Raila campaigns is goofing. And just like, you know, sometimes you don't want to accept, but just like there was some confusion last minute of Raila Odinga's presidential campaigns, these confusions are getting their way here. Yeah. Last general election, it's true. But there are one agency in Mount Kenya. That was, they've been, Raila is a very formidable candidate. With the network, with the structures, he will have the money, he will have everything. But the last click, you know, the last button to it is where things go down. It's because, I understand, because of his ability, not also being able to put up things and do things in himself, he has to depend on a system. And then the system works on borrowed time with a lot of vested interest. Now, those vested interests, the kind of campaign that, the kind of system around him during presidential campaign could be the same system around him during such continental context. And for me, I'm seeing this thing, these three undertakings. Number one, Raila candidature came at the wrong time. And even the continent can read the mischief. You know, the Gen Zs in this country have been wishing Raila doesn't get it. Yeah. For me, I said, I might have a personal, we might have, you know, all the issues with the way, the manner in which Raila runs his local politics. But when he decides to step out of the country, look for something, patriotism comes first, and we have to support him on that front. But the timing was wrong, because even the continent, even those around, even the government side that are supposed to campaign for him know very well that William Ruto is not pushing Raila based on technocracy. Is pushing Raila's agenda to African Union as a political solution, to try to push a political interest, to push Raila out of country. And I know even African president in their chit-chat, they can again say, Ruto is supporting Raila simply because he understands Raila was his opponent and has been a strong opponent. Raila is not a new name. He's a person who is known in this continent. Is all the controversies in the presidential context and all that, the continent knows. So the timing was wrong. Remember, it was just after the Gen Z protest. The Gen Z protest had the backing of some global powers. That's the truth. It had the backing. So it's very true that Raila is seen as a Ruto's compromise strategy to address his political solutions locally. I wish this would have been at that time when he was with the handshake arrangement with Uhuru Kenyatta. You could see. So that's one of the things. And that wrong timing is bringing a lot of confusion because not all the heads are converging around it. Number two, Raila Odinga campaign, AUC campaign, is a platform for plunder. Yes, I can tell you. It's a platform where people can get money to build their houses and get money. In Kenya, before anything is done, they must ask the question of what is in it for me. And the question of what is in it for me is in table. The people that are supposed to avail the funds to facilitate Raila's campaign team and to facilitate even Raila's campaign across the continent, they don't want to send Raila. They want themselves to go. They want to tour the continent in the pretext of campaigning for Raila, but in real sense, they don't have that international footprint even to campaign for Raila. I'm wondering. I saw the PS, Siungei, Foreign Affairs as person leading his campaigns. And I'm wondering, okay, this guy just became a PS the other day. In fact, if you ask me, you'll even go for someone like Kalonzo if you'll accept to lead that campaign. You'll go for someone, instead of that PS, you'll even pick Wetangula. Wetangula has been working in foreign affairs. You have picked you have picked someone with a profile. You picked a first time as someone who became a first time as a principal secretary in the foreign affairs to lead leaders' campaigns. I'm like, dude, are you really looking for someone, or you're just looking for someone who can remote control a conduit of taking money from treasury to here, but in real sense doesn't make sense. And lastly, I think the diplomatic standing of our country, Kenya, is also very weak. We are not very strong. We are fighting everyone in anything our way. Just the other day, we were fighting Ford Foundation. President was in France. Ruto was in France, was clashing with Macron. When the president was in US, advancing the US agenda in the continent, it is not receiving traction for all the continent because while some African presidents are also here, things are not really working. Russia is getting its way in Sahel. But when the president was speaking about Russia sometime in Switzerland, the international community was shocked. So our diplomatic standing is also not very strong. And it plays a key role because the West have an influence on whatever is happening in this position. Thank you.